Are you ready to break free from a conventional life and achieve financial independence through your version of tiny living, but you're feeling stuck trying to figure out the money part? Does the pressure to conform to societal norms make it even more difficult to embrace an unconventional lifestyle? Well, you're in the right place. I'm Laura Lynch, host of the Less House, More Moolah podcast, where every Thursday I'll bring you captivating interviews with individuals who have successfully made the transition to tiny living. They defied expectations and are thriving in their unique lives. We'll also dive deep into industry resources to address common financial concerns on your tiny journey. Together, we'll explore the emotional and practical aspects of pursuing an alternative lifestyle. I will describe a clear framework for project planning and cash flow management. Our goal is to intentionally build financial security and make a positive impact through our alternative American dream. So gear up for an exciting and empowering journey to create a life that truly resonates with you. Let's dive into today's episode and take the first steps towards financial independence and purpose through tiny living. Well, hey, Penny, thank you so much for joining me on the Less House, More Moolah podcast. I see you have your Less House there right beside you. So awesome. You're the first person on this podcast to be working on an RV living lifestyle. So thanks for bringing your perspective today on that.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to be here. And I so identify with the less house mentality. I've been practicing it for over 3 years full time. So this is fantastic to have an opportunity to speak with you and people that are going to be your listeners.
Well, thanks, Penny. So Penny's with Fee-Fi-Fo Fum Services, which is a super fun name. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But just to kick us off today, Penny, tell us a little bit about where you came from and what your physical home was like when you were growing up.
So I am from upstate New York, and I grew up on a farm and actually, it's funny that you asked, because the very first home that we had on our farm was a mobile home, because that's, you can't have a business without a barn, and the barn is the number one priority. So we later on, built my father designed a ranch house, and that from there we pretty much lived in traditional housing. And I am in Jacksonville, Florida right now, and I've been here for about 20 years.
Awesome. Yeah, I always ask this question about where people came from and what their home was like growing up, because I feel like that there are elements of our childhood that we kind of feel at home with later on in life. And so everybody, it seems like, has some tie to a small living space, whether it was camping growing up. That was my deal. I felt so free when, just in a camper or, a mobile home or what have you, having that smaller living experience younger, I think, really informs us later on. So how is it that you first thought that you might want to live in an RV?
So my husband and I started watching YouTube, which I think is pretty commonplace for a lot of full-time RVers to start looking. And I'm not even sure how we got into it, but we started following a family that tried it out for 6 months to a year. And little by little, I kind of worked it into a conversation, and my husband seemed to be open to it. And, little by little over the next 2 years, we worked our way into it and started to, originally our plan was that we were going to try this 2 years before we retired. And then when it was 5 years before we retired, we really, really had gone through a mind shift and thought, okay, we don't really want to be in a regular house anymore.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so interesting to hear the origin stories of how people first come up with this idea. I don't exactly know where our tiny living origin story was from. It may have been HGTV, I'm not sure, but it just was an idea that like solved a problem, right?
Yes, absolutely. We were in a situation living in Florida. It's common to have trouble with your homeowner's insurance, and we owned an older home, and it seemed like every other year, we get the I'm going to cancel you. You must do all of these things, and those things really started giving us more green lights to move into RVing.
It's so funny because I've gone through that exact same experience being in a house with a metal roof, and the metal roof has been around since the beginning of the house, but isn't still in great condition. And yet, for in Florida, the age of your roof. The roof is like the target for insurance companies. And so we're having such a hard time as we're wrapping up our normal life here, having such a hard time maintaining insurance on this house. And it's just every day pushing us like, gosh, we need to get out of here. Gosh, we need to get out of here, because the hassles of even a traditional life are something that people, don't realize, and how great to be able to find a way that's more simplistic. Though, of course, tiny living is challenging in its own right. But that's such a great point. You start to notice all the little bugs of living in a normal life when you're at the end of it, right? So what are your favorite parts of RV living?
So for me, it's that there's so many things that I don't have to worry about taking care of, like maintaining. My husband has just as many duties probably as he did before, because he handles the emptying the tanks and that kind of thing. But there's so little floor space. My house wasn't even that big, but just I would have to set out a schedule for like, okay, I'm going to handle this part of the house this week and that part of the house next week. And, I can vacuum my entire floor space while my husband is out walking our dog. And the smallness of the things that you have to take care of is one of my favorite things. And the other was getting rid of all the stuff that we had been paying to store. I mean, so much of, the 1,600 square feet we weren't using. We had 3 or 4 rooms that, just held stuff that obviously we didn't need. And now we don't have any of that. And those are two of the big things that I love about the change that we made.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I suspect that since you chose RV as opposed to some other tiny living options, part of your plan is about travel. So tell us about your travel plans.
Yes, that you got that exactly right. So I have about 3 weeks left at my job that I've had for 20 years. Woo-hoo. So we have been stationary in our RV for a little over 3 years. And so we are very much looking forward to casting off our lines and getting out. We own in an RV only country club, and we'll go there short term and kind of get used to, being in a new place, not having a job. And then after about 6 months, 4 to 6 months, we have a 6-month trip planned. And it's been very helpful as I'm going through the stress of wrapping up my job to have something planned for me to do that I couldn't do if I still had to show up to the office every day. There's no way that, it would take a miracle. I shouldn't say it, there's no way, but it's highly unlikely that my work would let me take a 6-month sabbatical. And so those things are what we have coming up. And primarily the biggest reason we chose RV travel is because we have pets and they're older. And as long as we have them, we will love them and we want them to be with us. But once, unfortunately pets don't live forever. I hate to talk about that, but we will probably still have an RV, but we will look into pursuing other types of tiny living, where we are able to do things that we can't do with pets.
Awesome. Yeah, I ran across recently, there's a website out there for house sitting. So you can sign up to be a house sitter, and that gives you an opportunity to travel and take care of other people's homes and see places, which is another, unique and great opportunity available right now. So how have people that are important to you reacted as you're, headed into this sort of career change and, what have you, and your family and friends are looking at you going, you're getting rid of your house?
So thanks for asking that question. Fortunately, people are used to me saying I'm going to do something and do it. And so there's been a long history of me living a non-traditional either work or non-traditional choices that I'm making. Like I didn't become a CPA until I was late in my 40s, or I might have even been 50 when I got to be. And my family and friends have seen enough evidence that if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to give it my best shot. And so we haven't had anybody say, gee, do you think this is a good idea? Because they've seen me try things and make them work.
Awesome. Yeah. So you have a track record of success when it comes to change in direction or pivoting or, grabbing onto something new. I actually talked about in the first episode about kind of the 3 steps of, kind of seeing the system for what it is, and the way that, sometimes the mortgage can be a trap, and, our lives can get stuck with a traditional house. And then from there, making a plan for how you're going to change your life. And then the execution is so difficult for people because you have to know from your own past experience that you can do something kind of non-traditional and be successful at it in order to feel the bravery to kind of step out on your own in that way. So I think that's a great lesson, kind of starting with other areas of your life or maybe smaller things, and seeing yourself successful helps you just very easily make a big change and not even be all that impacted by what others have to say about it. So I know you've had to adjust your career through this too. And you mentioned it earlier that when you leave your regular job in 3 weeks, you have something to do. Were you referring to travel, or are you referring to your career change?
So I was referring to my career change. I 2 years ago started a solo CPA practice, and I help new businesses get off on the right foot and get their system set up. And I'm loving it. I'm really enjoying the impact that I've had on people. And it's so rewarding to work with someone who just started a new business and they are afraid that they're going to get a surprise tax bill. And I've helped them all the way through to the end. And, when it was tax time, they had all the money that they needed and, no surprises, and they don't have to spend the next, year recovering from not having enough and trying to save enough for the next year. And so I can't wait to do this full time. I've been doing it every night after work. I spend about 2 hours working on my business. And so once I retire, if I go back to working 40 hours, I'll still be working fewer hours than I work now.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with trying to juggle a couple of things with an overlap. And it's good to kind of surge into that new path with a lot of excitement. And then, once you really get in it, you can just continue on with the momentum that you build during that surge period. So, what's the biggest hurdle been for you as you've been, kind of changing your lifestyle, changing your career? I'm sure that there's been something that has been a big task for you or a big emotional or mental block or
Mhm.
something. So, what's been that for you?
So I am retiring, but my pension doesn't start for 3 years. So I am in sink or swim territory. And I have proven that I can that I can help my clients and they reimburse me for the help. But it is uh, very challenging to actually walk out the door that and I haven't gotten there, but and I've been preparing for it, just like we talked about earlier. I've known for at least a year that this was my actual date, but mentally I will wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and think, oh, am I going to be able to do this? Is this really going to work? Yes, I've done it for 2 years, but it was just for fun,
Right.
and now it's like, I really am going to need to contribute a specific amount of money to our household income.
Mhm.
But thankfully, I mean, everywhere we have such a positive outlook on things that everywhere we look, we see green lights.
Mhm.
And the more green lights I see, the more it chips away at the feeling that wakes me up in the middle of the night and I can't go to sleep.
Yeah, I think that there has to be just a little bit of faith in there somewhere, faith in yourself and faith in your track record. You've been successful your whole career. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and be unsuccessful because you just change as a person. If you look back on your history, you have to kind of measure your gain in life and kind of sink into that and not get too much caught up in the unknown. But it is really scary to make that kind of change. So thanks for leading the way there, because I'm sure, so many other people who are transitioning to either RV or some other form of tiny living, and they have to make a career change in order to do so because they're moving out of their city or what have you. And so we need all the examples of bravery on career, on business launch and entrepreneurship as possible, because it is really hard to kind of jump out into the unknown like that. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
One of the values that's tied to tiny living is minimalism. And you talked about it a little bit earlier with, all the stuff that you all had around that you didn't need. How do you think about minimalism, and what are the other values associated with tiny living that resonate with you?
So one of the other values of tiny living that resonates with me is with a smaller footprint. I mean, I think that is, um, you may have the latest and greatest e- e- equipment or toys and that kind of thing, but having it in a smaller footprint means that you have less space to fill, and when something new comes in, something old has to go out. And that's been one of the values that we've really enjoyed. And I mean, minimalism, to me, I read a fascinating article forever ago about a woman who had to go to the hospital, and she was going to have to be there for like 6 weeks, and she needed it. She was allowed to bring a bathrobe with her, and she went through all of her robes. She could only bring one, and it took her a bit to choose the one that she wanted to take with her, and she so treasured the one that she picked, and it provided her so much value throughout the time that she was in the hospital that it changed her perspective on, she had probably had 5 robes. And, it may not even sound excessive. And yet she wasn't able to appreciate this one robe until that was the only robe that she had.
Yeah, I think that that is so true of many of the things that we have in our life. When you have too much, you can't really appreciate any one thing. There's, kind of a meme or an idea going around sometimes that we see about having higher quality, less stuff. And so instead of buying a bunch of cheap, junk that's in, duplicate and triplicate, like have a higher quality thing that you really enjoy. And that goes with clothing too. I see a lot with, clothing manufacturers, and there's so much talk around, sort of an impact of clothing manufacturers and fast fashion. And so in order to have better, higher quality pieces that last longer, is kind of a value that I'm seeing a lot of that I, particularly appreciate too. So what's the most important lesson you have learned about RV living? I see so much going on Facebook. I'm in all these groups with people, buying RVs and heading out for the first time. A lot of solo women doing this too. So what's a lesson that you have learned that you think would be really valuable for people to know when they're first getting started?
The first RV you have may not be perfect for you. And I think that you should be quicker at making a decision about buying something, within your means, obviously, but know that it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to meet every criteria. If you are able to get something this year, that's not on the grand scale of what your heart desires, but it gets you living that lifestyle that you want to live, you are so much better off doing it this year than waiting until next year when you're able to purchase the ideal rig, because your first rig may not even be close to what works for you. We decided we wanted a travel trailer instead of a motorized RV. And we've never tried a motorized RV. We thought that it was going to be the best choice. And now we're thinking motorized may be a better choice. And so the idea that we bought our rig knowing it wasn't our forever rig, but got into it and got into something that we could change the lifestyle has been the biggest learning experience that I would like to pass on to other people considering this lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just like your first anything, right? It may not be a perfect fit because you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know what the
Absolutely.
little glitches are going to be or exactly how your, 24-hour day is going to play out. And so you've got to sort of experiment and get started and iterate as you go along, right?
Absolutely.
So tell us about your experience with the RV living community. Like I said, I'm in a lot of groups, so I'm seeing a lot of talk. It sounds like there's a lot of energy there. There's a lot of parking issues and all kinds of things. So what do you have to say about the people that you're meeting that are living this lifestyle?
So one caveat is when we were in our house, we actually talked to our neighbors. Prior to that, my husband had lived in a house where he never talked to any of his neighbors. So we are somewhat used to that, used to talking to our neighbors. But so many of the people that we meet never talk to their neighbors. And in an RV community, it is a rare occurrence that you don't know all of your neighbors. I mean, they will say, hey, do you have problems with those little bugs? We're having problems with this. And, what about this? And have you tried that? And the community has been such, it's everything we expected it to be and more. And so the first question everybody asks each other is, what are you doing for internet? Everybody wants to know. And that's one of the most often talked about things in the RV community. But, we're fortunate that, right off the bat, we found someone that, when we're traveling, will come into our RV and look after our cat so we don't have to board him. And the community has been so welcoming, and it is so different from the lifestyle that a lot of people that we meet have had experience with in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that on other podcasts, particularly when you're, pulling into a new, RV campground or what have you, that, everybody gets out and, gets to know everybody and, new people in town. And, it's kind of interesting because we have become so isolated. And especially with this, notion as we get older of this, house that you spend all those years paying for. And then, for women, we often end up, by ourselves because we live longer. And so then you're in this house and you're so isolated and your family probably lives somewhere else. And, it becomes a little bit like, a prison. You're, solo, confinement in your house. So it's good to, think about other ways that we can be connecting with people, because connection is so valuable and so important for all of us, for our mental health. And so it's good to hear that people are super friendly and welcoming. So what have I not asked about that you want to share?
Let's see. I think you've covered everything. So one thing that is different, I think, about RVing than living in a traditional house is you do have to think about where you're going to stay when you're having work done. So in a traditional house or even a stationary tiny house, I think it would be the same thing. You can't pick, for the most part, you can't pick it up and move it. And so you have to find somebody that's going to come to you. Whereas for an RV, like we take our RV in for service every year, and we look for ways to incorporate, are we going on a cruise? Are we able to, are we able to board our cat? And, when we're gone anyway, can we drop off our RV on the way to the cruise port? Those things were surprisingly different. And I think that is that for somebody that's just starting out and thinking about starting out, that's something that you need to consider is what are you going to do? Because there will be maintenance that you need to do.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great point. I didn't even think about that. What happens when you drop it off to have it work done and your house is like away from you and you have to figure out where you're going to sleep? So that's a great point. So I have talked to, on this podcast, since we're focused on financial independence, obviously less house, more moolah, right? We want to talk about how this lifestyle may help jumpstart financial security or create some financial security that a sort of traditional path does not. So what are your thoughts on this, since you especially work in this space of, finance and helping people create financial security for themselves? What are your thoughts about that?
So I think reducing your footprint, moving into like smaller spaces, for the most part, people that I run into are become debt free or are within a year or two of being debt free. And I've been in the financial independence community for about 10 years. And I think becoming debt free is, it's always a hot button issue. Do you invest more and continue to pay your mortgage, or do you, you become debt free and then find alternate? For us, selling our house and moving into an RV really sped up our debt freedom. And that we looked at it in addition to the other things that we were interested in. We did look at it as a financial move that we were willing to make. And, I look at life as, my philosophy is the triangle of freedom. It's like financial freedom, time freedom, and location freedom. And, leaving our house behind and moving into an RV or, alternate, living situation has really sped things up for us. And I think that especially if you're willing to, save up some money, not buy your dream RV, but buy something that you can live in and then keep moving up, trading up, saving up a little bit more money. I think that it is definitely a move that will propel you into financial freedom that much quicker.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that. Obviously, that's my path to selling out of, the regular real estate is, helping me, frankly, play catch up, right? And also to boost financial independence. But I'm with you. Money is not everything, right? And so it's not always about, having a lot of money, stashed away somewhere, but having choice, right? Getting to choose what you do with your time. And so many people get locked in careers because they have that mortgage hanging over their head and they can't, take risk and change jobs or start a business or what have you. Likewise, they get locked in geography and, living in a place where they may not feel aligns with their values. I, for one, need to be hiking all the time. And so I need to be in a state where there's some public lands and, me and my dogs can, be exploring the forest. And so you have to take the risk of jumping out into the unknown in order to make that happen for yourself. And if you've got that 30-year mortgage that you're dealing with, it just holds you back from where you perhaps want to be. So I'm so glad that you've been able to jumpstart your, future or sort of cushion your security with the RV living. We'll be interested to catch back up with you at a later date and hear how it's going with all the travel, because I know that can be, the expenses there are totally different than sitting still. So we'll be interested to hear about that. So Penny, where can people find you and what are all your handles, and share with us how people can follow along on your journey?
Thank you for asking. I'm most active on Instagram. And so my handle on that is Fee-Fi-Fo-Fum Personal CFO. And my website is Fee-Fi-Fo-Fum Services. And I'm also on LinkedIn at Penny Christelle Rose CPA.
So Penny, before we go, just so that people can remember better, please tell us Fee-Fi-Fo-Fum, remind us of what that means, because you told me before and I've totally forgotten. So you'll have to remind me again.
Thanks for asking. So it is federal employee, because that's what I was when that's why I am and for another 3 weeks. And it's financial independence and frugal option and forget you money, which is the most important thing in the financial independence community.
It's where you can say, forget you, right? I've got the money to go on.
Yeah, absolutely. Forget you, my job. I am taking off.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Penny, for sharing your non-traditional path with us. I see that's one of your values listed on your website, and that is a value that I totally gravitate towards too, doing things differently. So thank you for sharing your story with us. I'm sure that our listeners will use this as, good fuel as they're continuing on their exploration of their options. And we really appreciate you sharing your ideas and expertise with us today. So thanks, Penny, for being here on the Less House, More Moolah podcast.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Less House, More Moolah. To access valuable financial tips and resources tailored to your tiny living journey, join our exclusive community at thetinyhouseadvisor.com. Here you'll find a supportive network of like-minded individuals committed to helping each other navigate the challenges and celebrate the victories of embracing a minimalist lifestyle. So don't miss out on the opportunity to be part of this empowering tribe. Be sure to tune in next Thursday for another insightful episode of Less House, More Moolah, where we'll continue to explore practical solutions and inspiring stories to help you create the life you've always dreamed of.
Please see the show notes for important disclosure regarding the Tiny House Advisor LLC and this episode.